Last night I finished The Eye of the World. It's the first book in this little series you might have heard of by Robert Jordan called The Wheel of Time, soon to be a major motion picture television streaming event thingy, paid for by Balsamon himself, Jeff Bezos. Honestly, that would have been such good casting. They really should have had him cameo. But in all sincerity, thank you, Mr. Bezos, for bringing The Wheel of Time to my home screen. Unless it sucks, in which case, screw you, man. This isn't my first rodeo with The Wheel of Time. I actually started reading the series a number of years ago. I think I read the first 4 or 5 books, maybe. I enjoyed it. I just started reading other things. There's so much to read in so little time. I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to finish the series, but the years kept on going by, and I just never picked it up again. And the road ahead to finish The Wheel of Time seems so daunting. And with the show coming out, I thought it'd be a great time to revisit it. There's a lot of stuff I've forgotten. It took me about a month to finish this book, reading a few chapters every night. That's a bit slow for me. I tend to read at a pace of about 3 to 4 books a month, and I have a massive to-read list, and I don't want this series to take up all of my time, so I'll need to pace myself. Slow and steady wins the race. So I figure if all 14 books are roughly the same length, and I read 1 book a year, I'll be done in about 2034? Jeez, I'll be in my 40s by the time I finish this series. So I'll probably need to pick up the pace a little bit, maybe read 2 books a year, and then that way I'll be done 2037, so I'll only be in my mid-30s. In order to finish this series in a reasonable amount of time, I'm gonna have to do at least 3, preferably 4 books a year. That's gonna cut out a lot of my reading time. These are chunky books. They're no small deal. Sitting in bed at night with this massive tome on my chest really impedes my breathing, but it's worth it. So my second time through The Eye of the World, I liked it more than I did the first time. Though there are some problems with the book, especially in the last quarter going into the climax of the story. Stop me if you've heard this story before. There's a young farm boy living in a remote village, and a wizard comes to him and says, "You are the chosen one, and the Dark Lord's armies are coming for you." The Wheel of Time intentionally leans into classic fantasy tropes. Robert Jordan really is paying homage to the Lord of the Rings, and while this book does start out feeling very much like Fellowship of the Ring, it quickly becomes its own thing. But I think it was a very smart move for Robert Jordan to start with something familiar and build on top of it. So now it's 31 years later, I can understand why modern fantasy readers would read this and just be like, oh, I've seen this all before. It was fresh when Robert Jordan first did it, and now maybe it seems iterative or cliche. But I really enjoyed it. It's just really interesting to see the progress of fantasy and this book's place in that process. How many of the tropes from Lord of the Rings carry over into this book, and then this book kind of establishes some new things that have since become tropes. I really enjoyed the world building in this book. In the first few chapters, the 2 rivers and the people that live there feel fully formed. Side note to the showrunners, either we get Moraine's classic and epic speech about the men of Manetheren, or we riot. As our character's world is basically upended and they're forced to flee out into the world, this is where the book really starts to take on its own shape. For me, the middle section of the book was the strongest, which is not normally what you hear, right? Usually the beginning and the end are the best, and the middle is kind of muddled. But I actually really enjoyed the journey, how the characters were broken up. I loved seeing how Rand and Mat took care of each other when they were off on their own, and I loved them being chased by the Dark Friends. The idea of Dark Friends is so good. It's a little bit like conspiracy theory-esque, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, who's a dark friend around me? I also really like the back and forth between Rand and Perrin, even though it's not really a back and forth, it's just all dependent on POV. Whenever Rand is talking with Egwene, he feels like he's tripping over his own tongue. He can't quite say the things he means to, and he always thinks to himself, I wish I was more like Perrin. Perrin really has a way with girls. He knows exactly what to say. And it's so funny because when you get into Perrin's POV, he's saying the exact same thing about Rand. He's with Egwene and he can't quite say what he means, and he says, I wish I was more like Rand. Rand knows how to talk to girls. It's great. I just love that because that's so true to life. When you're kind of in your late teens, early adulthood, this is exactly how I felt, at least. I always looked at a lot of my friends and I was like, oh man, so-and-so really knows how to talk to girls. He knows what's going on. But he didn't. He knew just as much as I did. We were in the same boat. Thom Merrilin might be my favorite character in the book. I really think he is. He doesn't get a whole lot of screen time or page time, so to say, but the time we do get with him, I really like it, and I love that it's kind of obvious that he's not dead. Rand and Mat in Caemlyn, is it in Caemlyn? Yeah, so Rand and Mat in Caemlyn go into the inn that's run by, I forget his name, but he's one of Tom's friends, or he's an acquaintance of Thom Merrilin's, right? And he basically says, I'll believe he's dead when I see his corpse, which is just like, it's perfect. It's perfect advice for both life and especially fiction. If a character is killed off screen, they're probably still alive. I also really liked at the beginning of the book how they're talking about their crops are failing and winter is more brutal than it has been in years past, and spring is cold, and you just get this sense that really there is this kind of wave of despair approaching. And having gone through the last year or two, it felt really relevant. For me, the book almost became more of a cautionary tale as I kept reading. On one end of the spectrum, you have the dark friends who have all sold their souls to evil. And then on the other end of the extremist spectrum, you have the children of light, who are essentially religious zealots, and they believe that they're fighting the Dark One, and that everyone else is really beneath them. But in truth, you wouldn't want to run into them any more than you would a dark friend. They're basically just as dangerous. And I remember from later books, even among the Aes Sedai, you have extremist factions. And then in another corner, you have people like the traveling folk who live by the way of the leaf. And I really like this ideology. I think it's really succinct and kind of cool. But the idea is really that committing an act of violence harms the actor as much as it does the victim. Basically, there's never any excuse for violence committed against another human being. And it's a cool idea, but it is yet another example of extremism, because in life, there are times when violence is necessary, sadly. But it's just interesting to see all these different extreme ideologies mingle and contrast. And it kind of made me feel like, is there a way to fight evil without becoming an extremist? Is there a way to live life in the middle? It feels very appropriate to our day and age and the environment in which we find ourselves living. It seems like everything on the news, everything online is such an extreme position. And it's like, do we always have to take such an extreme approach to everything in life? This book kind of breaks all the rules with fantasy character names. From the White Cloaks, you've got Byre and Bornhold. I couldn't even keep straight in a scene who was Byre and who was Bornhold. And then you've got Elaine, Egwene, and Elida, right? So a lot of E's. Then you have Gawain, Gareth, and Galad. I couldn't keep those guys straight either. And then there's also Lan, and we hear about his brother Lane. So many characters have such similar names. Another thing I thought was kind of funny is when Rand climbs up onto the palace wall, you get a good look at Loghain and falls basically into, was it Elaine or Egwene? Elaine, and falls basically into Elaine's lap. I just thought it was so funny that she stuck up for him so much. It's a bit unbelievable that she would go out of her way to protect this total stranger. Maybe this will be explained more in future books. I don't remember it being explained. It's just one of those things that you kind of have to suspend your disbelief for, that this princess is gonna stick up for this dirty commoner. But maybe it's a good character moment. Who am I to say? One more moment that I thought was really funny was in The Ways. Robert Jordan writes that the horses might have been walking a treadmill for the change around them. And I kind of did a double take at that. I was like, what, treadmill? And so I actually went and looked this up because it took me out of the story so much. And it's like, oh, the treadmill was invented in 1818 by William Cubitt. So maybe it's a little bit of an anachronism, maybe not. Maybe in the world of the Wheel of Time, the treadmill has been invented already. I didn't think it was his best description. But other than that, I really thought his prose was really clean, really neat. He's very descriptive, a little bit descriptive heavy, I would say. Any criticisms I've laid out so far are very minor, things that can be overlooked easily. For me, the biggest issue I have with the book is the ending. It felt like a bit of a hard left turn. For the bulk of the book, the characters are all heading in one direction together. They're all trying to get to Tar Valon. The goal is clear. But by the time they regroup in Caemlyn, it seems like a lot of new things are introduced in rapid succession as they are needed in order to forward the plot. And I really like the character of Loial, but when he is introduced in the middle of one of their conversations with him, he's like, oh, hey, I heard about this guy talking about the Dark One, how he's gonna go destroy the Eye of the World. And then Moraine's like, all right, we all need to go to the Eye of the World. How do we get there? Well, we can take these things called the Waves. We can basically unlock fast travel through portals. And the only one who can really help them navigate the portals is Loial, the Ogier that they were just introduced to, who happens to be the same guy who told them about the Dark One's plot to destroy the Eye of the World. They travel through the Ways, they're looking for the Eye of the World, they find the Green Man, who is sort of like this guy I can only describe as Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy, but more eloquent, and he is guarding the Eye of the World, but it's cool, he's friendly, he's gonna help them, and all of a sudden out of nowhere comes two of the Forsaken who we have not really heard anything about. We don't know who they are, what they're up to. They kind of come out of nowhere and become the final boss battle, or at least the penultimate boss battle. To me, the stakes were kind of like, I don't really know who these bad guys are. You know, like who are these dudes? Where are they coming from? It felt to me like it could have been handled a little bit neater. The destination could have been clearer from the outset. Throughout the entirety of the book, Myrddraal and Trollocs have been chasing them in Dark Friends and all the minions of the Dark One, and the Dark One's been visiting and tormenting the Emond's Fielders in their dreams. I'm reading The Hobbit to my daughter right now, and I was thinking like, well, The Hobbit, you know, you set out and they know that they're going for the mountain the whole time. and they have all these adventures on the way, but the end destination is always clear, and the final boss is always clear. And I think the story is stronger because of that. And yes, it's a children's tale, but I think this story too could have been stronger if the end destination had always been clear. If these Forsaken had been chasing them and driving the Murdral and the Trollocs and the Dark Friends from the outset, that would have been a lot more effective, and the final showdown would have been a lot more impactful in my opinion. But it's still a good time. It's still very enjoyable. I liked the book a lot. I am excited to keep reading the series. I think it's a strong start to the series. Strong introduction to the world and characters. I'm gonna break the rules a little bit here. I think the next book I'm gonna read is actually gonna be New Spring, because I have read other books in the series. I'm a little bit more familiar with the world. I can remember a lot of it, and from what I've seen online, it looks like they will be incorporating elements of New Spring into the TV series, so I don't really want that to spoil the book for me. So that's the next book in the series I'll be reading, and I'm gonna try to finish it this next week because it's a small book. But yes, great book, highly recommend it. Go pick yourself up a copy if you haven't. I'm excited for the show. I really hope they pull it off and they don't screw it up like they did Foundation. Oof. If you love Foundation, I'm sorry, just disregard what I'm saying. Go enjoy the show. I'm happy for you. As always, thanks so much for watching, you guys. You know, my channel's supposed to be really exclusive. I don't want very many subscribers. I'm a micro YouTuber. I want to keep it that way. Do not hit the like and subscribe button. Do not hit the bell icon. Do not share this video. Do not. That is not allowed on this channel. You want to subscribe to a channel, go pick somebody else, because, yeah, reverse psychology. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you back here soon.